Hi everyone, Jenny here, and today we're going to be making a little dress for my daughter, and it's been inspired by something I saw on Etsy, a little dress. So it's all pretty simple. It's all going to be in rectangles, so it's going to be a pretty simple little dress to make. So hopefully it turns out good. So follow me along and we'll see how this turns out. Okay, so I took one of my daughter's PJs, and this happens to be a 3-monther. And I measured from underneath her armpits and around her arms. So this is only going to give me one measurement, so I have to double it to go around her arms and her chest. I went a little bit over so that she can kind of grow into it a little bit, because she's starting to get to where she needs more like 3 to 6 months and not necessarily 0 to 3 months. So I kind of came up with this little pattern here, and you can see I got 4 and around and 4 down, 7.5 crossed, and I had this little diagram here. I haven't decided how long I wanted it to be. So there's going to be 3 different layers. The first piece is going to be 24.5 by 10.5. So that is one whole round piece that goes around her chest. And then the second piece, which is the lining, is going to be 24.5 by 13.5. And then the sheer piece is going to be 24.5 by 11.25. And then her 2 sleeves is going to be 10.5 by 6.5. And I'm going to do like a hem of where I turn over a quarter and then I fold it again at a half. So I just kind of did my total where I have 2.5 inches going towards hemming on the top and bottom, and 1.25 inch hem allowance for the sheer piece, because that's just based on the fact of how I cut the sheer piece. So I will show you that in a second. And I just kind of did another little diagram about this will be 8 inches final, 10 inches final, and 9 inches final, because the sheer does not go all the way to the top. It starts about halfway down of the lining. So I got my pieces cut out here. So here is the main dress piece. So you got the floral, the sheer, and the lining. So with the sheer, how I paste it or cut it, I have the salvage line here, which is really soft, so I didn't not going to cut it off. So I'm going to sew along here to attach it to the lining piece. And then here's my 2 sleeves here. I already had the lining in the floral for another project for her, and all I had to do is go get this little sheer fabric here, which is really quite soft. So the first thing I'm going to do is do all my bottom hems here, and then after I get my hems done, I am going to attach the sheer to the lining. And then at that point we can create a tube by sewing this end with this end, and we will put all 3 of them together when we do that, so that way they don't move. And then we'll create the top hem by itself. And the reason I'm doing that is because the total round circumference around her chest is 15 inches, but I made this to be 24.5, including the seam allowance of a 1/2 inch. It actually is going to be bigger, so we're going to put a 1/4 inch elastic through the top hem to keep it up on her, and then she can grow into it a little bit as well, because the 1/4 inch elastic is quite stretchy. So I will get my hems pinned for the base of there, and then that's when I'll come back and show you how I have that pinned. As I said, it's going to be folding over a 1/4 and then folding it again for 1/2 inch. And that will be my seam allowance for the bottom. And I'm doing the same with the top, except we will leave a portion of it open so I can thread the elastic through. So when I get the bottom hems all pinned up, I will show you that piece in a second. Alright, so I got everything pinned for the 1/4 inch. I'm going to run a basting stitch just to keep it where I wanted. Now technically you're supposed to go through and use the iron, but I'm lazy, so I'm not going to do that. And I do have my sewing assistant here, and you can hear in the background my son's in here with his tablet, and he's wanting out of this room, so I'm gonna go let him out. Hopefully he doesn't disturb his grandparents too much, because they're doing something construction wise in their room. So I'm gonna do this, and I'm going to now base stitch, and I'll come back when I get that done. Alright, so I got all my seam allowances here all sewn up, base stitched up, so now I can do my 1/2 inch up and do a true sewing stitch with a sewing machine. I realized that I did not tell you how I came up with the measurements. So for my daughter's chest, it roughly ends up about 7.5, so I added on 1/2 inch to be 8 inches around from one side of her chest to the other. So then I doubled it to go around her, which would be 16 inches, and then I added another 8 inches on there, so that when I measure out the elastic to be about 8 inches, it scrunches up and gives it kind of a ruffle. And for these sleeves, I measured 4 around, from her armpit to the outside to give her plenty of room. So another 4 for around, so it's a total of 8. Instead of doing another 4, I just did 2, so that way it just gives a little bit of a ruffle. With the elastic of, I'm going to measure out 4 inches. So the next piece is going to be to do my 1/2 inch seam hem here, and I'm going to pin that, and I'll come back when I get ready to sew it. I gained another sewing helper because my parents are making too much noise, and so she is scared. So that is Abby and Selena. They look like they're related, but they aren't. She's about 11 years old, makes her about 10 years old. So they are 2 of my parents' babies and my girls. Alright, so I got them all pinned. Now I'm going to sew with a regular stitch. And my stitch is at 2.5 on my builder machine. When I did my basting stitch, it was at a 5. Alright, so I got everything hemmed. So now I laid out my lining facing up, and then laid the shirring on top facing up. And I measured, I wanted it to hang about 3 inches down past the lining. So I laid it out, and then I have marked where it hits up here. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to do a 1/4 inch down, and then do 1/2 inch down, so I'm going to have 2 lines. And I'm going to leave a space in the top portion here, so I can put some elastic in there. In fact, I might even close that up and string the elastic through the ends and just sew up the ends, so I'll have 2 pieces instead of 1, like I would do at the top. So I think that's what I'll do. Alright, so I just pin this up here to keep it out of the way, and I will sew along, lining up the fabric with these little dots with my air and water soluble pin. So hopefully you're able to see that. And now I'm going to sew. Alright, so I got my little casing all sewed up. So now I am running some elastic through using a safety pin. I have already pulled it through enough to where I can go ahead and sew this in so it stays put. And I'm using about a 10-inch piece. No, 12-inch piece, excuse me. Kind of hard, it's been packaged up in this little So it's not very hard to lay flat here. Roughly 12 inches. And I cut 2 of them this size. And I just did that since I got 16. I just went down roughly 4 inches. So it'll gather it up even more. Then for the sleeves, I cut up about a 6-inch piece. 2 of them. Because it's 8 around. So it'll scrunch up 2 inches worth. Alright. So I'll finish threading it through and sewing it, and then I'll see you at the next part. Alright, so I should have done this before I did the elastic, but I'm going to base stitch the 2 pieces of material down the side here so it'll stay together. So when I sew them together like this to make a tube, they'll stay in one spot. I don't have to worry about 2 pieces of fabric. Instead, I just have to deal with this as one piece along with the floral piece going around. So once I get the basting stitch done here, I will put this on top of it, and then we will sew it in a tube all together in one piece. Alright, so I got it basting stitched down the side here to keep them attached. So I did another realization that I probably should have done the whole second one or both of them with this on top as well. So I'm going to keep it separate. So we're going to make a tube out of this and out of this, and then we will only have them connected at the top. So this will be a true lining, and this will only be scrunched underneath this layer here, which I think will look just fine. In the picture that I saw that got this inspiration from, they're actually using shearing here, so you would connect all 3 layers and do the shearing while they're flat. So, but I'm using elastic bands instead of elastic thread, so I've only done shearing once, so I am not so comfortable with that. So we're going to do it this way. So next piece is to put right sides together and sew down on both of these here, and we can go ahead and do the sleeves that way as well. Alright, so I got everything pinned, right sides together. See there? So I'll sew all down all these sides. Then the next thing would be actually to connect these 2 pieces together. So I will get everything sewed and I will get these pinned together and come back to that. These ones here, we can go ahead and do the hem on here and leave an opening for the elastic, which I said I'd cut about 6 inches worth of elastic for each of these. And then once I get done sewing the sides, I'll come back and show you how I got these 2 together. Okay, I just want to quickly come on here and say when you get done with sewing all these sides, you're going to want to either serge it or do a zigzag stitch down the sides, so since these materials will fray. The only one that might not is my lining here, because it's a little bit more of a knit fabric. But if you're not using knit fabric, then you definitely do want to serge or do a zigzag stitch so it doesn't fray. I went ahead and did it just so it looks a little bit more professional, but I am not a professional sewer by any means. I was a little off down there, but that's okay. Practice makes perfect, and you always will make a little bit of mistakes until you get better at what you do. All right, so let me get pinning these together, and I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so I got it all pinned. So I laid it out right sides out and laid this on top, which is how the dress is going to look. I lined the seams up, so you can see there's a seam, there's the seam there. Now somehow my lining ended up being a little bit longer than my outside fabric here, so I just kind of pinched it a little bit as best as I could. So I lined up this side and lined up this side as best as I could. Then did the top and bottom, so I lined up 4/4. And then just pinched in, as you can see here, where I had a little bit of extra fabric. So I did my best to distribute it as best as I could. So you could go back into the lining and re-sew it to make it match. However, I don't find that necessary, especially since we are putting in elastic. So I think it's going to look just fine. So I'm going to do a basting stitch, and then I'm going to turn inside out, and then we'll do the hem, which will leave a little spot open so we can thread the elastic in it. So when I get done with the basting and do the hem pinning, I will come back. All right, so I went ahead and basted around, and then basted down 1/4 inch. Now I have it down at 1/2 inch, all pinned in place. Oops, I'm sorry about that. And then I did the same with the sleeves. And again, you're gonna leave an opening for the elastic to go through. So I'm gonna do that right near the seams at the sides. So probably about right there on that one. Same with this one, and wherever the seam is at on this one here, I'll do the same. So when I get it all sewed, I'm going to come back and show you the where I got the hole at for the elastic. All right, so I hooked it to a safety pin and I threaded it through, kept moving it as best as I can, trying to keep it as flat as possible so they kind of wrap in one and they don't get twisted. Don't know how successful I was at that, but now I'm going to take my 2 pieces and sew them together. So give me a second here. Sorry, move off the camera a little bit. So I'm just going to lay it on top here and sew right across that several times to make sure it's nice and secure. Then I'll tuck it in and sew down the side. So give me a second on that. Alright, so it's not the best stitching in the world, or best can be. That's okay, it's secure. Then all I have to do is just stretch it out, get it all in there. And what this is for is to mark this side here, because this is where I'm going to put one of the sleeves, and I wanted to, best as I can, line it up. So I just pulled it out like that, sorry you can't see, and I just lined it up and put the clip right across this, of that seam. So I'm gonna sew this up by stretching it out and following down there to get it all sewed up, and repeat on the sleeves. Alright, there we go. And be careful when you're sewing not to catch the elastic in there. Alright, on with the sleeves. Okay, so I got the sleeves all sewed up and even thread the elastic inside and sewed up the hole. And I found the 2 sides here. So I just lined up with the seam here and pulled it to find the other side, and I have zigzagged these 2 together. So now they are attached. I'm going to do the exact same to this sleeve here. And all I did was just line up the 2 seams of the sleeve and the actual body of the dress as best as I could. It doesn't matter if they're off a little bit, because I mean they're going to be inside here. And then once that's done, that's all done. And I think it will be pretty good for the first little item that I made from scratch. So yeah, I'll get this sewed on and show you the final result. Alright, so it's all done. I think it turned out pretty good for my first time. I have some ideas of what I would do differently from up here. I would probably turn them inside out, attach to the top, and then flip it right side and then sew around, and then thread the elastic in between the two, and then finish that seam off to be, that way it won't be so bulky up here, but it's not that terrible. So, and I think it looks pretty good. Now to try it on my little one and see how it fits. Probably gonna be a little bit big, and I'll have her face blocked because I don't show my kids his faces on the internet. So, but I'll try to provide a picture for you of her wearing it. She might have her PJs on. Not sure. It all depends. Alright. Well, if you like this, please subscribe and like the video. And everyone have a nice day. Bye.